Okay, now then we'll take a first pass at, do you want to respond to something that one of your colleagues has said? You've all been generally in the right vector, but did they bring up any new things or something to think about in that piece? Okay, then I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to open it to you guys to start thinking about questions that we might want to, that you're interested. My question is, as we move ahead in the ability to collect and process information, what do you see, or do you see a problem occurring in the personal rights of people to be free from the aggregate of information that currently exists today? And that's the first part of the question. And secondly, do you think that we will have barriers placed specifically because of that? And I'll open that one up and you guys go wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah, it's interesting that we focus in this country primarily on the right of free speech and the right to express ourselves and to have that enter. I think in other countries, many other countries, the focus is on the right to access information, and right now we're running into a conflict of those rights. The companies that deal in information for the time being have acquiesced to the requests from countries like China and Egypt and other countries to limit the access to certain types of information. I think our government is going to step in to start legislating companies that are based in the United States not to listen to that type of request in the same way that we legislated companies not to participate in corrupt practices that were going on in other countries. I think this whole idea of the right to access is something that's going to become a worldwide issue.
Okay.
I don't know whether that's in direct to your point, but it's something that we've been thinking about a lot.
Okay. Somebody else want to respond?
Well, I think the answer is yes, and yes to your questions. Yes.
No, I forgot the question.
Yes, the rights of people will be, our ability to collect data and move data around will impact on the kind of privacy issues that associate with people. And yes, I think the government's going to step in and say what you can and can't do. I think we'll have to sort of live with that a little bit. I think we're going to have to figure out how, from a technology perspective, how our technologies can adapt to the constraints that will be placed on us. And I think we'll have to be prepared as companies to defend our technologies and their use against particular kinds of threats. I think it's a challenge, though.
Okay. Chad, what do you think?
I think you're going to have just some pendulum effect right now. You have Twitternet tweeting. There's a certain expectation that I can put what information I want there out on the web. I can put it on my MySpace page. I can put it on my Facebook page. But then if somebody then uses that for marketing, I'm going to be upset about it. If you put it out there, you lose the expectation of privacy. And there's going to be a certain point at which people realize just how much of themselves they're putting out there and how much they're making available, and then what can be done with it. And then, of course, they're going to want to put the cow back in the barn at that point. And I see a kind of a pendulum back and forth between the two until we get it right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that a lot of our focus up to this point has been on, let's say, single level interaction. That I define privacy by what I choose to put out to the world. But what we see is happening now is that it's a second order effect, that we're starting to define privacy by what are the rights of the people to whom I gave the information with an expectation of privacy. For example, my expectation of privacy with the telephone company has been that unless they have a warrant, they can't release to whom I've been talking or what phone calls I've made. That expectation is starting to be eroded as people start passing information around all these networks, and I believe that's what you're talking about that that's where things are gonna have to be tightened up. What do we expect? How many stages can my information go through, and do I just give up at this point, or do I look for some limitations?
Okay. Somebody else?
I think there's always going to be a debate, and the whole system's designed to keep that privacy debate going for all time. The question is aggregating information about an individual ever going to benefit the individual? You know, is it going to be useful to me at some point to have somebody hand me that information that's aggregated about me? And if it's not, then I'm probably going to fight against that. But if I see some personal benefit to giving people my information, I'm going to do it. I do it all the time on websites.
Yeah,
To gain access or whatever, but we'll just see. It's hard to predict that one just because the technology is changing so fast, and the ability and the computer intelligence to process it is changing so rapidly too.
Remember in Big Brother, or in 1984, the motto "Big Brother is watching" was not a warning; it was supposed to be benevolent. That Big Brother is watching you. He's got your back, essentially. The way we interpreted it was was the surveillance, but we may get back to the benevolent aspect, that people want to give up their information because they feel they're being protected by other people having this information. Hard to say which way it's going to go.
That leads to the next question. I'm going to ask one more, then we open. In light of the fact of the inability of people to 100% protect our banking information, our privacy information, what would you tell a person who is resisting digitizing all of their medical records and having them stored in a single spot?
What would I tell them?
Yeah.
Well, I always use an analogy that when we switch from being a private company to being a public company, one of the things you have to do as a public company is fully disclose everything bad. In fact, the worse that something happened to you, the faster you had to disclose it. And that actually gave you a sort of freedom. It sort of relieved you from the fact that everything was out there. Everything was always going to be out there, so you didn't have to worry about it. I'm thinking people might get used to the fact that everything is out there. Things that we now consider private, may not be private anymore. We may have, if there's anything left of the concept of privacy, it might be very, very, very small.
Okay. Somebody else want to respond to that?
You might see a market eventually that will start growing for people who want to. I mean, if everybody is requiring your medical records be digitized, but you are resistant to that, that may form a market wherein you have a particular HMO that is willing to go back to the old paper, and that will specifically cater to those people. It's like Amazon wants to track everything you purchase so that they can better choose what to sell you, but you have no control over whether or not they share that information. You do have the option not to buy from Amazon. You do have the option to go back to the old way and drive and buy the book. So you still have the choice. And I just see a market developing for people that want to live their entire lives that way.
Well, and I can see how that market idea gets to Joel's comment about I might be willing to share my medical records because I think I have good medical records. I think I can get a lower price on my insurance if I put it out there. So I'd rather put myself in the pool of people who are lower risk, lower cost, and if I'm willing to give up some of my perceived privacy in that regard, I might do it. But I think there might be layers or levels of choice.